What is discrimination? Discrimination is where someone is treated unfavorably due to a particular characteristic they have. Most people will experience unfair treatment at some point in their lives. However, not all conduct that is unfair will be unlawful discrimination. The law around discrimination is very specific and can be complex. The law provides protection against discrimination based on a number of characteristics or grounds. These characteristics include race, sex or gender, sexual orientation, transgender status, intersex status, age, religion, disability, marital status, and pregnancy. The law also protects people who are associated with those who have any of these characteristics, as well as people who are mistakenly believed to have these characteristics. Areas of public life. For the law to protect against discrimination, it must also occur in a specific area of public life. Discrimination that occurs in private, for example at home, is not unlawful. Some of the areas of public life covered by the law include employment, education, accommodation, the provision of goods and services, access to public places and facilities, and membership and participation in clubs and associations. LGBTIQ+ discrimination. LGBTIQ+ people in Australia still face discrimination in many areas of life. It is important to remember that LGBTIQ+ people are protected against discrimination under both state and federal law. The laws create protections that make it illegal to treat someone differently on the grounds of their sexual orientation, gender identity, intersex status, and transgender status in the covered areas of public life. For trans and gender diverse people, these legal protections will usually apply regardless of your gender, how you present, whether or not you have medically transitioned or affirmed your gender, and whether or not your legal documents reflect your gender. Trans discrimination may include being treated unfairly or differently because you are trans, being treated as a gender presumed for you at birth, and being forced to follow a rule or requirement as a gender presumed for you at birth. Let's take a closer look at one of the most common places in which LGBTIQ+ people experience unlawful discrimination. Discrimination at work. Treating someone differently at work will not always be unlawful discrimination. Providing you with legitimate negative feedback or asking you to undertake additional training to improve your performance will likely not be discrimination. This is because employers are entitled to manage their employees' performance. However, if you are treated unfavorably at work on the basis of being an LGBTIQ+ person, this might be unlawful discrimination. This could include bullying, harassment, offensive language, exclusion, someone deliberately undermining your work performance, or imposing workplace rules that apply unfairly to you. It is also unlawful to discriminate against someone when they are applying for a job. Let's have a look at some common scenarios of unlawful discrimination in the workplace. George is a gay man. His boss, Mark, makes inappropriate comments and sexual jokes about George and his boyfriend. Mark also promotes a far less experienced employee to a senior role instead of George and says that people might not feel comfortable working for George. This is an example of unlawful discrimination. George is being harassed at work and unfairly disadvantaged due to his sexual orientation, which is against the law. Alison is a trans woman. She uses the women's bathroom at work and sometimes wears a dress and high heels. Alison's boss takes her aside and tells her that her clothing is unprofessional and that she should wear pants. He also asks her to start using the men's bathrooms. This is another example of unlawful discrimination. Alison is being made to follow the rules and requirements that apply to male employees because of the gender presumed at her birth, even though she is a woman. What are my options if I experience discrimination at work? If you have experienced discrimination, there are a few options available to you. First, you can try to resolve the issue informally. If you feel comfortable, you can raise the issue of discrimination directly with your employer. This could mean having a conversation with your supervisor or a HR representative, or writing a letter explaining what has been happening. If it is safe for you to do so, you may choose to raise the issue directly with the person who has discriminated against you. What happens if I decide to make a formal discrimination complaint? If resolving the matter informally doesn't work, or you don't feel able to approach your employer directly, you can make a formal complaint to either Anti-Discrimination New South Wales or the Australian Human Rights Commission. You cannot make a complaint to both. You will have 12 months from the time the discrimination occurred to submit your complaint. If you want to make a formal complaint, it is a good idea to seek legal advice first. The law in this area can be complicated, and speaking to a lawyer will help you to understand what your rights at work are and the best place to make your complaint based on your individual circumstances. For instance, some exemptions to discrimination law can apply to certain employers, such as religious schools and organisations. When you make a complaint to Anti-Discrimination New South Wales or the Australian Human Rights Commission, they may ask you for some additional information about what has happened. Once a complaint has been made, they will send a copy of your complaint to your employer and give them a chance to respond. Complaints are addressed through a process called conciliation. This gives you and your employer an opportunity to discuss what has happened and to try and find a solution. Conciliation is a more informal process than going to court and is usually free of charge. If you make a complaint to Anti-Discrimination New South Wales and they are unable to resolve the matter, they may refer your complaint to the New South Wales Civil and Administrative Tribunal, or NCAT. If you make a complaint to the Australian Human Rights Commission and the Commission is unable to resolve it, it can choose to terminate your complaint. If this happens, you may be able to take your complaint to the Federal Circuit Court or the Federal Court of Australia. What are the possible outcomes if I decide to make a complaint? Before making a complaint, you should think about what outcome you are looking for. There are a few possible outcomes from a discrimination complaint, which include a verbal or written apology, compensation for any injury or loss that you have experienced, and reinstatement to your job if you lost your job because of the discrimination. You can also request disciplinary action for the person who discriminated against you, training for that person or organisation, as well as updating or creating policies within your organisation to prevent discrimination happening in the future. What if making the complaint makes things worse for me at work? Treating someone badly because they made a discrimination complaint or have helped someone make a discrimination complaint is called victimization and is against the law. Your employer is not allowed to make life difficult for you because you made a complaint. If this happens to you, it is important that you get legal advice. Applications to Fair Work Commission. Another option that may be available to you if you have experienced discrimination at work is to make an application to the Fair Work Commission or the Fair Work Ombudsman. They can arrange a mediation process to help you and your employer discuss the issues in the workplace and come to an agreement. If you think that you lost your job due to discrimination, you might also be able to make an unfair dismissal claim to the Fair Work Commission. You must lodge this claim within 21 days of when you were dismissed. If you make an unfair dismissal claim, your matter may go to a hearing or a conciliation conference. You will have to show that your dismissal was unfair due to discrimination. If it is established that you lost your job due to discrimination, you should seek legal advice to find out if you are eligible to make a claim.